So imagine this, it's 1994 and not only did Tottenham just finish 3 points off of relegation, now they got banned from the FA Cup, took a 12-point deduction for the next season, and on top of already being on the brink of bankruptcy, they were also fined almost £1 million. As the kids say, they were cooked. Their new owner Alan Sugar was the most hated man in North London. He had come hoping to save his childhood club, only to find that, as he said it himself, it was like World War III in there. He was forced to sell off all their best players to increase ticket prices, and the worst offense of all, he had to fire their manager Terry Venables, who, on the other hand, was the fans' darling. In his own words, I felt like the man who shot Bambi. It got so bad, they were showing up to Alan Sugar's house, knocking at his gate. That man needed to pull a rabbit out of a hat before they outright kicked him out, so, I kid you not, one day he calls up their star player Teddy Sheringham and announces to him, "Get ready, we're about to sign Maradona." That was the level of desperation. They were trying to bring in Diego, even though by then he was playing at Newell's Old Boys and had not only been handed a 2-year suspended prison sentence for shooting a BB gun at some journalists, but had only played 5 matches all year due to injury. I don't know how they didn't see it coming, but the outcome was pretty simple. He showed up for the World Cup, scored a couple goals and celebrated by staring towards the camera with pupils the size of a coin, meaning another 15-month ban for performance-enhancing drugs came his way. Before anyone in the press could realize the kind of mistake Sugar had almost made, he buried the story and went looking for a replacement. He tried to get Chris Sutton but failed, tried to get Jean-Pierre Papin but the former Ballon d'Or told him to bounce, so one day, as he sat in his yacht off the coast of Monte Carlo, someone had the bright idea that, since we're in Monaco, we might as well give Jurgen Klinsmann a call. A couple hours later, the World Cup winning striker shows up. Sugar asks him if he'd like to join Tottenham. Klinsmann steps to the side to take a phone call, comes back, and let's just say Sugar was so shocked when he said yes that he rushed the player to the Monaco headquarters, agreed on a transfer fee, and became so paranoid that the player would regret it and go back on his word that he called the paparazzi on himself to make sure that by the next day, before they had even agreed on a salary or signed any contracts, there'd be a photo of him shaking Klinsmann's hand on the cover of every British newspaper. But I guarantee you one thing, every headline had one question only. Why the hell had Jurgen Klinsmann just signed for Tottenham Hotspurs? I mean, nothing made sense. Not only had they somehow signed one of the most famous players on the planet for just £2 million, about 200k less than what Newcastle had just paid Derby for Paul Kitson, but at the time, no English club had ever signed a foreign superstar like that. Cantona was the closest thing they ever had to that, and well, not only was he a bit nuts, but when Leeds United had signed him from Nîmes, he hadn't even been called up to the national team for over a year. Klinsmann's signing was simply the biggest news to hit the league in years, and no one could believe it. Even worse, the English weren't even sure they liked it. Not only were they yet to forgive the Germans for problems of the past, but his Germany had been shrouded in doping allegations, and Klinsmann himself, well, foreign football wasn't really broadcasted in England back then, so regardless of his absurd goal-scoring tally at every World Cup and European Championship, the one thing they knew him for was for allegedly diving in a World Cup final. They hated him. As the Evening Standard wrote, the signing of the great diver Klinsmann is a big insult. From the savannah of Central Africa to the rainforests of Papua, right up to the igloos, everywhere, in fact, apart from Germany, everyone hates Jurgen Klinsmann. But well, about 60 days later, the same journalist that posted the article infamously titled as "Why I Hate Jurgen Klinsmann" will be publishing another titled "Why I Love Jurgen Klinsmann." And man, had they actually known anything about him, they wouldn't have made that mistake. Look, this is a guy who first made the local newspapers at 8 years old because he scored 16 goals in a 40-minute match that ended 20-0. Just that year, he scored 106. By the time he was 16, he already had a professional contract offer on the table, but first, his parents forced him to complete his apprenticeship as a baker. Then, he had to complete his military service, but one way way or another, in his first proper season as a pro, he put down 21 goals in the second tier and got signed by Stuttgart. That very same season, he already finished as their top scorer, and by the second, with things going much worse as he clashed with their manager Otto Baric, guess what happened? Baric ended up getting the sack in the very next match, almost as revenge. Not only did Klinsmann get a hat-trick in 12 minutes, he then put in 2 more goals to make it 5 in a single match, eventually hitting 12 goals in 11 games, scoring a brace against Dortmund to put Stuttgart in a German Cup final, scoring against Bayern once there, securing a place in the next year's Cup Winners' Cup despite the defeat, only to again score an assist against Torpedo Moscow as Stuttgart got knocked out regardless. But if at that point he started feeling a bit frustrated, then manager Ari Hahn came in and said the magic words: "You always play it too safe, but you owe it to yourself. Take some risks." So, the next time he faced Bayern, with national team manager Franz Beckenbauer watching from the stands, a ball quite literally fell from the skies and he smacked in a bicycle kick. After that, it was game over. The skinny blonde kid from Göppingen took over. A couple weeks later, he had debuted for the national team by summer, with a golden boot to his name as well as a place in the Team of the Year and the Goal of the Season award. He had made it to the Euros, and if a goal and assist in the group stage weren't enough to make much of an impact, with Germany getting knocked out the very next game, just a couple months later, he showed up to the Olympics with a quarter-final hat-trick and a goal to secure a bronze medal, meaning that by December, not only was he already being named German Player of the Year, he had gone straight to 8th place in the Ballon d'Or rankings. But in what should have been his crowning moment at Stuttgart, he got them to their first ever UEFA Cup final against none other than Maradona's Napoli, only to come out defeated despite scoring yet again, all made that much bitter by the fact he only lost because he had to be sidelined for the first leg. So after that, having already spent the whole season watching as Inter copied AC Milan's whole transfer strategy, bringing in his German teammates Matthäus and Bremer to fight back against AC Milan's Dutch trio of Van Basten, Rijkaard and Gullit, and immediately snatching the league from them, it was a no-brainer for everyone involved. Klinsmann had to join Inter. Their trophies were guaranteed. But fast forward 9 months, and no matter if he was Inter's top scorer, now closing in on 26 years of age, he was still trophyless. However, as the 3 Germans watched Maradona take the title they most craved, in Klinsmann's case, for the 2nd year in a row, while, on the other hand, the Dutch trio of their rivals AC Milan won the Champions League, well, they set out for revenge. 2 months later, with Klinsmann already holding on to 3 goal contributions after 3 games at the 1990 World Cup, in his own words, we had one clear mission: to win the whole thing. We knew that if we got our act together, we were the best team. We didn't fear anybody. But the moment they went into the knockouts, it happened. It was already time for Germany versus Netherlands, Inter versus AC Milan, and if it was already clear that history wasn't on the side of the Inter Milan trio, add to that the fact that the Dutch had won the last Euros, eliminating them in the process, and it was pretty clear they were the favorites, their biggest challengers. And it all became that much worse for Klinsmann when, 23 minutes in, Rudi Voller got spat on by Rijkaard, getting involved in a whole mess that ended up with both sent off, leaving Klinsmann alone up front, going up against Ronald Koeman's defense without his biggest partner. To many, it seemed like an impossible mission, at least until he began firing missile after missile, determined to brute force his way to victory, eventually breaking through with the deadliest of near-post runs. And just like that, once the curtains had closed on that game, not only had they done it, but the German newspapers were calling it an almost perfect performance, saying that not a single German forward had had such a brilliant match in the last decade. But that was just the first barrier. Then came Czechoslovakia, Slovakia. Once Mateusz dealt with them, they barely made it past England, and once in the final, it was the same scenario once again. Now the trio is going up against Maradona, the man that had taken the league title from them, the man who had beat some of them at the final of the previous World Cup. And after some of the cagiest 60 minutes of football ever seen at a match of that size, the controversy started. Pedro Muzon brings Klinsmann down, he flops around like a fish out of water, the replay comes on, and somehow, no matter how many angles were shown, maybe upset by his theatrics, the world convinces itself there was no contact, completely ignoring the 15-centimeter cut on Klinsmann's leg. And to make it all worse, then with 3 minutes left, it's Voller who goes down, this time leading to a truly questionable red card and penalty that won them the game, allowing everyone who watched it to paint the Germans as divers and cheats, completely ignoring the indisputable fact that Argentina had played dirty the whole game. Regardless, now a World Cup winner, Klinsmann was more determined than ever to break his curse at club level, and I'm guessing at this point the Serie A title just didn't do it for him, because instead he went for the UEFA Cup again. In the first round, he completed a 3-goal comeback with a winner in extra time. The next one, he ran it back, scoring 7 minutes into the second leg to jumpstart another massive comeback. And after 3 straightforward rounds against Partizan, Atalanta and Sporting, having already scored the goal that put them in the final, he saved his best moment for last, going up against Rudi Voller's Roma and gliding past their defense before playing in Nicola Berti for the easiest goal of his life, but also the goal that secured Inter their first continental trophy since 1965. In the blink of an eye, Klinsmann had gone from trophyless to possessing 2 of the most sought-after trophies in football. He had become a mainstay in the Ballon d'Or rankings. Everything seemed to indicate that at 26 years old, he was about to hit his prime. But then, Corrado Enrico took over Inter Milan, and it all fell apart. 20 draws in 42 matches, Klinsmann himself only managed 8 goals all year. In the UEFA Cup, they were knocked out by Boavista, and by summer, Mateusz, Brema, everyone who had a chance to leave was trying to, especially Klinsmann, who by then was starting to lose his place as a starter for the national team, quite literally being benched for the Euro's opening game, eventually earning back his place with a goal and assist over the next 2 games, only to end up infamously losing the final to Denmark, who had not even properly qualified to the tournament, only being allowed to play it because Yugoslavia was disqualified for no longer being a country that even existed. As Berti Vogts admitted, we were conceited, pretentious, and arrogant. No matter what, excited by the prospect of being managed by a young Arsene Wenger who seemed determined to take over French football, Klinsmann joined Monaco, but though he instantly hit 20 goals in a season, leaving them just 4 points off the title, well, the team that beat them was Bernard Tapie's Marseille, also known as one of the most corrupt clubs in the history of football, and when it was exposed that they had quite literally paid off teams to take their foot off the gas and let them win, Wenger sort of lost his head, and despite the two somehow still taking Monaco to the first Champions League semi-final in their history, soon they were both looking to leave. But while Wenger ended up going to Japan in what looked like a spiritual retreat, Klinsmann went off to the 1994 World Cup, scored 5 goals in 5 games, including one of the most beautiful in the competition's history, but got knocked out by Bulgaria regardless, as this time it would be the one complaining that we lost because we were too full of ourselves. So yeah, Klinsmann was just as lost as Wenger, and to Alan Sugar's luck, that was precisely when the two met. Remember when he stepped up to the side to take a call? According to him, all he did was call his wife and ask, "Wanna go explore London?" And she said yes. The problem was that he had no idea how hated he was there, but his solution was actually kind of ingenious. Seeing all the articles calling him a diver, he called up one of his friends and asked for help, and he told him that if there's one thing the Brits like, it's banter. So the day of his presentation, Klinsmann packed up goggles and a snorkel, and though he was too shy to actually take them out of the bag, the moment he got there, the first thing he said was, "I got a question for you. Is there a diving school in London?" And man, I cannot stress this enough, the tabloids loved it, even more when Sheringham convinced the whole team to get in on a joke, with the whole gang going for a swim once Klinsmann scored on his debut. After that, nothing was ever the same. Klinsmann and Sheringham meshed together like they had known each other their whole lives. 7 games in, the German was already up to 10 goals. Add to that the fact that the fans quickly realized that Klinsmann was not so evil after all, instead being just kind of a hipster driving around in a beat-up Beetle and showing up to the pub to get a couple pints with his teammates. And after just 2 months, he had become so loved that articles were being rewritten, journalists were apologizing for their comments, and his shirts were out of stock. The whole thing hyped him up so much, he hit the greatest goal-scoring form of his career with 30 goals and 14 assists, not just taking back the award for German Player of the Year, but instantly being named Premier League Player of the Season as he brought Tottenham back up to 7th place. Suddenly, every other club, every other fan base wanted to get some foreign superstar. Chelsea brought Gianfranco Zola, Arsenal got Bergkamp, eventually even Tottenham went for Ginola. The Premier League was never the same, but as good as I made it sound, it wasn't so simple. Over the year, despite playing some of the most attractive football in the league, Tottenham had such a terrible defensive line that they quite literally conceded 4 goals more than last place Norwich. Their whole structure was still so broken from the pre-Alan Sugar era that once manager Osvaldo Ardilhas got sacked, he called it the impossible job. And with Klinsmann also seeing the writing on the wall after he got 8 goal contributions in the 5 games up till the FA Cup semi-finals, almost taking on Liverpool all by himself in the quarters only to get knocked out regardless, as they somehow conceded 4 to Everton. Towards the end of the season, he received an offer from Bayern, and thanks to a clause in his contract that allowed him to leave if he wanted to, as well as his belief that this was his final chance to win a league title, which somehow he was yet to add to his trophy cabinet. He just had to do what he had to do, leaving and pissing off Alan Sugar so much that upon receiving the news of his departure, he came out to the press with a Klinsmann shirt in his hand and threw it on the ground, claiming he wouldn't even wash his car with it. One way or another, once at Bayern, not only did he keep up his form, but he played so well that by the end of the year, he was second in the Ballon d'Or, only a few points off of George Weah. And as it became more and more evident that somehow, at 31 years old, he still kept getting better and better with age, he proceeded to dominate the UEFA Cup like never before, scoring 2 in the first round, 3 in the second, an absurd 6 against Benfica in the last 16, then 3 against Nottingham Forest before skipping the semi-finals, and scoring the last goal in the final against Bordeaux to kill the match, taking the trophy once again and officially breaking the all-time record for most goals in any UEFA competition, 15 in just 12 matches. However, there were still 2 things that irked him. First, he still hadn't won the league, and second, Mateus, who was once again his teammate, had grown to hate him, repeatedly hitting up the tabloids with conspiracy theories that Klinsmann had been working in the shadows to take the German national team's armband from him. But all that led to was his absence from that summer's Euros, watching from home as Klinsmann made up for the mistakes of '92, putting down 3 goals in the 3 matches up till the final, where, of course, in English soil, with all the Tottenham fans behind him, once it became the first ever Euros final to go down to a golden goal, Klinsmann assisted the decider just 5 minutes into extra time, leaving an absolute fairy tale as the Queen herself handed him the trophy and the whole stadium chanted that football is coming home. Regardless, back in Munich, Mateus was so bitter he bet their sporting director £5,000 that Klinsmann wouldn't even score 15 goals the next season, so once he proved him wrong and finally took the Bundesliga title he'd been dreaming of for so long, he just turned his back on him and left for Sampdoria, which would likely have been his last club had Alan Sugar not called him up in January begging him for help as Tottenham sat in a relegation spot 20 games into the season. season, to which Klinsmann flew back to London, put the white kit back on, slowly got them back up the table, and with 2 games left in their decisive relegation match against Wimbledon, put on simply one of the best Premier League performances of all time, scoring 4 and assisting 2 more to beat them 6-2 and save his club. Inexplicably, then going off to the '98 World Cup over summer and putting down 4 goal contributions in 4 matches, becoming the first ever player to score 3 or more goals in 3 consecutive World Cups, taking his tally up to 11 goals, just 3 off of the great Gerd Müller, and shocking the world by announcing that it's time, I'm not the same anymore, and retiring from football.